he's perfectionist, as almost everyone we've discussed would fall into that personality characteristic. They're a perfectionist.
For decades, he was Hollywood's most magnetic, charming, and unpredictable star. The man with the killer smile and eyes that held a universe of secrets. Jack Nicholson wasn't just an actor. He was a cultural force, a fixture at the Oscars and Lakers games, the renegade who became king. He built a career on being the guy you couldn't look away from, playing characters who were rebellious, dangerous, and unforgettable. But a question has always lingered in the shadow of his monumental career. Who did the master himself, Jack Nicholson, admire most? While Nicholson has never sat down and published an official, definitive list, he's left a trail of breadcrumbs, over a half-century of interviews in Hollywood history. By looking at who he's praised, who he's revered, and who he's pointed to as a true original, a clear picture emerges. This isn't a formal list he just released, but rather a look at the Mount Rushmore of acting, according to everything Jack has shown us. This is a personal history of cinema, told through the actors who inspired one of its greatest architects. So, let's explore the 6 actors who, by all accounts, Jack Nicholson considers the greatest of all time, and the stories behind why they earned his ultimate respect. Before we get to the names, you have to understand what Jack looks for in a performance. It's never been about box office numbers or a shelf full of awards. For Jack, it's about something more elemental, more primal. You can boil his admiration down to 3 core principles. First, authenticity. He loves actors who bring a searing, undeniable reality to their roles event. If that truth is messy, raw, and uncomfortable. He respects performers who don't just act, but bleed on screen. Second, unpredictability. As a master of keeping the audience on its toes, Nicholson is naturally drawn to artists who are utterly fearless. He loves the risk-takers, the ones who make choices no one sees coming, who can turn a whisper into a war cry and make a simple scene feel like the most important moment in the world. He respects the danger in their craft. And third, a transformative presence. Every actor on this list has that rare ability to not just perform in a scene, but to fundamentally change its chemistry. They command the screen with thunderous rage or with profound silence. They don't just play characters. They build entire worlds. With that in mind, the list becomes more than a ranking. It becomes a lesson in the art of acting itself. So, let's begin with a name that might surprise you, a performer from a totally different era whose rebellious spirit laid the groundwork for Jack's own. The first name on Jack Nicholson's list of greats isn't a contemporary from the gritty, new Hollywood of the 70s. It's a titan from the Golden Age, a woman who bent the iron-willed studio system to her will and redefined what it meant to be a female star. Nicholson's first salute goes to the one and only Bette Davis. For Nicholson, Bette Davis was more than a great actress. She was a philosophical inspiration. He saw in her a fellow warrior, an artist who refused to be stuck in the pretty, demure boxer's Hollywood built for its leading ladies. In an era when women were often typecast as saints or sirens, Davis fought for roles that were complex, unconventional, and often unlikable. She wasn't afraid to be ugly, physically or emotionally, if the role demanded it. This commitment to a character's brutal truth resonated deeply with Nicholson, whose own career would be defined by exploring the darker corners of the human psyche. But it was a specific piece of Davis's wisdom that seemed to shape his entire approach. Davis had a philosophy: you play the same part over and over again, otherwise they will not know who you are. And that's how you get to be a movie star. Now, that might sound like advice to get typecast, but Nicholson understood the deeper meaning. It wasn't about playing the exact same character. It was about building a recognizable, consistent, and powerful screen identity, a brand of truth the audience could count on. Think about it. When you went to a Bette Davis movie, you knew you were going to get a certain kind of fearless, intelligent performance. You knew she would command the screen. Similarly, when you go to a Jack Nicholson movie, you expect that glint in his eye, that slow, dangerous smile, that hint of rebellion. You expect the Jack persona. He learned from Davis that you could create this powerful identity while still delivering wildly different performances. He could be a romantic lead in terms of endearment, a maniacal villain in The Shining, and a cynical detective in Chinatown. But they were all unmistakably Jack. Nicholson admired her as a chameleon who never lost her core. He saw her fights with the studios for better scripts as the blueprint for artistic integrity. She was a rebel in pearls, a punk rocker in a tailored suit. She didn't just ask for respect. She demanded it, using her talent as a weapon. For a young actor like Jack, watching her was a masterclass in how to not only survive in Hollywood but conquer it on your own terms. Next on Nicholson's list is an actor who stood as the polar opposite to his own fiery, explosive style. A man who could command a film with little more than a glance, whose power was in his stillness, whose charisma was a cool, steady flame. That man was Paul Newman. Jack Nicholson. Paul Newman was the absolute definition of cool. In an industry full of actors screaming to be noticed, Newman whispered, and everyone leaned in. Nicholson's admiration was born from a deep, professional respect for a craftsman who had mastered a completely different set of tools. While Jack's characters often let their chaos hang out, Newman's characters bottled it up, letting the pressure build behind those piercing blue eyes until the tension was almost unbearable. Nicholson seemed to believe that Newman's longevity came from the fact that he never relied on the flashy tricks of stardom. His greatness was in his subtlety. Think of him in The Hustler or Cool Hand Luke. There's a profound sense of an interior life, a whole world of thought and feeling churning beneath a calm surface. Nicholson, the master of the outward explosion, was fascinated by Newman, the master of the inward implosion. It was like a volcano admiring the quiet, immense power of a glacier. They were, as Nicholson noted, two very different shades of charisma. They dominated the same era but never felt like rivals. They were two sides of the same golden Hollywood coin. Nicholson was fire, Newman was ice. Jack represented the untamed, anarchic spirit of the 1970s, while Newman carried a classic, almost mythic American coolness. He was tough without being loud, charming without being slick, and heartbreaking without shedding a tear. This quiet confidence was something Nicholson deeply respected. Newman's performances were a lesson in economy. He proved you could achieve maximum impact with minimal effort. This admiration also extended to Paul Newman. The man in a town known for its scandals, Newman was a figure of integrity, a devoted husband, a successful race car driver, and a philanthropist who gave away hundreds of millions of dollars. He wasn't swallowed by the Hollywood machine. He lived life on his own terms, with a grace that was as compelling as any of his performances. For Nicholson, who always played by his own rules, Newman was a role model for how to navigate a treacherous industry without losing your soul. Some actors enter a scene. They say their lines, hit their marks, and serve the story. But the next actor on Jack Nicholson's list was never content to simply enter a scene. The perfect way to describe his process is that he fractures it, then builds something truer in its place. That revolutionary force was, of course, Dustin Hoffman. Nicholson's respect for Hoffman is the respect of one revolutionary for another. They were both part of a generation that blew the doors off old Hollywood conventions. But where Nicholson was the charismatic rebel, Hoffman was the meticulous character actor who proved a leading man didn't have to look like a matinee idol. With his unconventional looks and obsessive dedication, Hoffman redefined what screen greatness could be. He made it about authenticity, not aesthetics. Nicholson saw this as a seismic shift, crediting Hoffman with proving that great acting doesn't have to look heroic. It just has to be real. The idea of fracturing a scene is incredibly insightful. It suggests Hoffman's process was one of deconstruction. He'd take a character a moment and break it down to its most basic, human elements. He'd shatter the polished veneer of traditional acting and then, in the rubble, construct a performance of such raw, awkward, and undeniable honesty it was impossible to look away. Think of his nervous energy in The Graduate or his vulnerability in Midnight Cowboy. These weren't performances, they were immersions. Although they never shared the screen, Nicholson spoke of a deep, mutual reverence. It's been said they were like two actors from the same fire, different flames, same heat. It's a perfect description. They were forged in the same crucible of 1970s cinema, driven to push boundaries. But their methods were different. Nicholson's flame was a wild, unpredictable bonfire. Hoffman's was a focused, intensely hot blowtorch, meticulously reshaping any material it touched. Nicholson, who often relied on his powerful instincts, was in awe of Hoffman's chameleonic ability to completely disappear into a role. While the audience always saw a piece of Jack in his roles, Hoffman could become so unrecognizable you forgot you were watching an actor at all. This wasn't a criticism of his own style, but an appreciation for another path to greatness. He respected Hoffman's tireless work ethic and his unwavering commitment to the reality of the character. Depends on mood and motivation. Hackman was a rock. He was the guy you could build a movie around, knowing he would provide a foundation of absolute authenticity. He was the actor's actor, the ultimate pro you could always count on. There are actors with great faces for the camera, and then there are actors whose faces are a cinematic event. The next man on Jack Nicholson's list is an actor of pure, uncut intensity, a coiled wire of energy with what Nicholson called one of the greatest faces in film, a face where you see every thought happen on it, like lightning under skin. This, of course, is Al Pacino. Nicholson's fascination with Pacino is the fascination of one force of nature with another. They emerged from the same primordial soup of 1970s cinema, both bringing a new volcanic energy to the screen. Nicholson once remarked that while they were never cast as brothers, in energy, in ambition, they might as well have been. It's a perfect observation. Both actors channeled the anti-authoritarian spirit of the era, creating iconic characters who were at war with the world and with themselves. What Nicholson seemed to appreciate most about Pacino was his raw, unpolished, and sometimes messy brilliance. He loved that Pacino was willing to take huge risks, to push his emotions to their absolute limit, even if the performance wasn't always clean. A Pacino performance, in Jack's view, bruises and lingers. This is a crucial insight. Jack wasn't interested in safe, pretty acting. He was interested in acting that left a mark, that felt dangerous and alive. Pacino, with his explosive outbursts and deep wells of vulnerability, was the embodiment of this ideal. Think of Michael Corleone's chilling transformation in The Godfather, his eyes going from soulful to dead. Think of Sonny Wertzick's desperate, sweaty bank robbery in Dog Day Afternoon. These aren't polished performances. They are raw nerves, exposed. Pacino doesn't just play a character, he erupts into them. This coiled wire energy is what captivated Nicholson. You're always waiting for Pacino to snap, and that unbearable tension is the source of his power. They were the two undisputed heavyweight champions of intensity in their prime. While they represented different types of chaos, Nicholson's laced with a sardonic humor, Pacino's more operatic and tragic, they shared a fundamental belief in the power of bold, fearless choices. For Jack Nicholson, Al Pacino wasn't just a great actor. He was a kindred spirit, a fellow warrior in the battle for cinematic truth. We've arrived at the peak of the mountain. The final name isn't just Jack Nicholson's favorite actor. In his mind, he is in a category all his own. The man who changed the language of cinema, the undisputed king. For Jack, the greatest actor of all time was, is, and always will be, Marlon Brando. Nicholson's reverence for Brando borders on the religious. It's the awe of a master craftsman for the god who wrote the book. Nicholson minced no words on the subject, stating in a tribute, "Other actors don't go around discussing who is the best actor in the world, because it's obvious Marlon Brando is." To Jack, it was a self-evident truth, like gravity. Brando didn't just play the game, he transformed the board itself, washing away the old, presentational style of acting and ushering in a new era of raw, mesmerizing realism. This admiration started early. As a young actor, Nicholson was so captivated by Brando's performance in On the Waterfront that he reportedly saw it twice a night, studying it like a sacred text. He was obsessed, watching how Brando could convey a universe of pain with a simple shrug or a downward glance. Brando showed him that acting didn't have to be about projecting to the cheap seats. It could be about pulling the audience into a character's soul. The depth of his admiration is best illustrated by the story of The Godfather. Nicholson was offered the role of Michael Corleone, a part he knew would be huge. He turned it down. In interviews, he gave two reasons. First, and most importantly, he believed an Italian-American should play the part. But second, the role didn't share any scenes with Marlon Brando. Nicholson figured he might only get one chance to work with his idol and wanted to wait for a project where they could truly interact. He finally got his wish in the 1976 film, The Missouri Breaks. By then, Nicholson was a superstar, yet he described working with Brando as psychologically intimidating. He recalled watching the dailies of Brando's scenes and being so blown away by his genius that he had a crisis of confidence, feeling he had no business being in the same movie, let alone the same country, as Brando. It's a stunning admission. Even at the height of his own powers, Jack was still the kid in the movie theater, completely in awe of Marlon Brando. For Jack, Brando was a liberator. He gave performers permission to be difficult, vulnerable, unpredictable, and human. So that's the list, the 6 pillars of acting greatness. According to the legendary Jack Nicholson, the trailblazing spirit of Bette Davis, the cool restraint of Paul Newman, the fractured truth of Dustin Hoffman, the unshakable guts of Gene Hackman, the live-wire energy of Al Pacino, and the revolutionary genius of Marlon Brando. It's a list that reveals as much about Jack himself as it does about the icons he admired. But admiration is a personal thing. This is Jack's Mount Rushmore, but who would be on yours? Who are the actors that redefined the craft for you? The performers whose work left a bruise, sparked a fire, or taught you something new about being human? We want to know. Drop your list of the greatest actors of all time in the comments below. There are no wrong answers here, only a shared love for the magic of cinema. We read every single one, and we can't wait to see who you choose. When you look at Jack Nicholson's list, as a whole, a clear picture emerges. It's a portrait of an artist who, above all else, valued truth. Whether it was the defiant truth of Bette Davis, the quiet truth of Paul Newman, or the explosive truth of Al Pacino, he was drawn to performers unafraid to be real, in all its messy, complicated glory. This list dismantles the myth of Jack Nicholson as just the cool guy in the sunglasses. It reveals the student, the scholar, the devotee who spent a lifetime studying the craft he would eventually master. It shows us that behind his own iconic rebellious persona was a deep respect for the artists who paved the way, who took the risks, and who made his own revolutionary career possible. In the end, this isn't just a list of 6 actors. It's a roadmap to understanding one of cinema's greatest minds. It's a final, generous lesson from the master himself, a parting gift that reminds us that true legacy isn't just about the work you create, but also about the greatness you recognize in others.